Hey, Pierce, it is great to see you again.
Howdy.
So, I am a huge fan of both your work and you. Your Red Rising series is not only immensely popular, but also deeply philosophical. But yeah,
And
this
my
is a great
readers
start.
are
Great start.
extremely sharp and intelligent.
Right. But one of the things I actually admire the most about you is you're not a man who walks with your ego in front of you. I remember when we first met at some Comic Con, we were on a panel together, and I
Mhm.
didn't realize how popular your books were until later on in the con when I saw the lines for your signing booth. I was in the booth that was supposed to be a kind of one away from you. We were supposed to have an empty
Mhm.
spot, but you
Mhm.
were next to me and crowding my space. And I had asked the organizer, could we like ask this guy to move a little bit? And she said, no, we can't because his line's going to double around and then we can't block the exits for safety reasons. So I love that about you, though. I love that I didn't know that you were so popular. But what I'd really like to do first is go kind of back in time before you're a professional writer and find out,
Mhm.
did you always love science fiction? And did you always know that you wanted to be a writer?
First, no, I didn't know I always wanted to be a writer. I always found a refuge in stories, much as you have, I'm sure. But I think that the idea of becoming a writer didn't dawn on me until much later. And of course, it grew out of a love of sci fi and fantasy. And I'd say my first love was fantasy. Science fiction, I always had an attraction towards. But the thing that really sparked my imagination when I was a kid was fantasy stories and some of the classics. My parents did this wonderful thing where they got me the classics abridged. So it's like all written for children, but it's the great classics of Western literature. It gave me like 8 or 9 years old. So it gave me this blueprint of what stories should look like and immersed me in these great stories that would have been inaccessible to me at that age. And so my parents did a very good job at incorporating books into our daily lives as a kid. And we moved around a bunch, so I couldn't take my friends with me, but I could take stories with me. And I think that the muscles started working, the writer muscles started working when I was a kid building forts or digging holes and foxholes in the backyard. And I didn't always move to a new place with friends, built-in friends, right? Sometimes you move in the middle of summer and you just have yourself and the woods in the backyard. And so I would read books and then go think about the books or think about the plot lines, and particularly if there weren't sequels, and start creating my own little fantasy worlds. But it wasn't until 18 that I put pen to paper. And I was reading a book at the time, and I was waiting. Actually, Feast for Crows had just come out, and I read Feast for Crows because I'd read in high school Game of Thrones, and I was crushed when I found out that Feast of Crows was the most recent one. And I looked up the gaps between the years. It was like 4 or 5 years. I'm like, well, shit, I got to start making my own content. So I started writing then and there on a yellow legal pad on my bed when I was 18.
That's amazing. Now, you've also, though, been really open in the past about your teachers when you were younger and some of the doubts that they
Hmm.
seeded in you. And I'm
Hmm.
curious how you got past that, especially in an artistic field, because a lot of writers struggle in that early part of their careers because we work in a vacuum of information, right? Like, unlike employees in an office, we don't get constant feedback about how our projects turn
Hmm.
out. We just kind of have to plow forward and hope that our writing is good.
Yeah, why do you think so many authors turn into alcoholics? I think that, sure, I faced a lot of perhaps negative feedback early on from different teachers, and I think a lot of that is the difficulty of the job of being a teacher, particularly when a kid doesn't fit into the framework of the class. A kid might be bright, he or she might be exceptional, but then also be a handful. And so you have to keep the overall class in mind. So those teachers probably just didn't know how best to teach me or how best to keep me entertained. And it's not necessarily their job to entertain, but I look at that more of a flaw in the school systems we have. I'm more a fan, like, ideally, we'd all have that pedagogic instruction that the ancient Greeks had. We'd just be walking through the countryside, learning from philosophers. But yeah, I really didn't fit into the school framework. I was never fundamentally interested in the subject matter unless it was, something that I could really engage with. Like history, I always sunk my teeth into, and biology was fun, and chemistry and things like that. But I couldn't even get into AP English. I had difficulty. I was told that my writing was by a writing teacher. My writing was turgid and over verbose and muddy and all these things. And yeah, it really, I never really thought it was a gift that I had. In fact, I didn't know that I was very creative for a long time. And I was always telling stories. My parents can pull out camcorder videos of me just making stuff up until I fell asleep when I was a kid, but I didn't really have it cultivated or nourished by teachers until, except for one or two who gave me, one gave me Harry Potter when she just been on sabbatical in England and came back with this great book that was sweeping England by storm and gave me a copy of Harry Potter. And that woke up my imagination. So I had certain teachers, like one or two, who really put, how would I say it? They didn't teach me how to forge the sword so much as they showed me what a sword should look like. And I think that was how I became my own teacher and learned myself, but through failure, of how to become a writer. But the negative feedback that I got, for a while, it kept me down. And then I just became so enthusiastic about telling stories and not necessarily interested in the medium. I wasn't worried about stringing sentences together. I mean, heck, well, not until my second book that I realized someone's dialogue should be, if it's a different voice, they should be on a different line. Like, I just didn't even think about it. I was just excited to get a story out. And so then I think that ignorance of how to tell a story and some of the particulars emboldened me, and I had a lot of confidence because I didn't know what I didn't know. And I think that's a very valuable tool for writers, is ignorance. For instance, I think that the worst thing that someone could do is read their own reviews. I know a bunch of authors, and I know a lot of them read their own reviews consistently, really like best-selling authors. But if we talk about, superpowers, that old question. Okay, I'll ask you, Evelyn, what superpower did you want like early on in life or at a certain point, but then realize it would be the worst one to have?
Oh, probably knowing what everyone thought.
Boom.
Right? I mean, I think it's such a
Reading
common
minds.
answer, right? Reading minds.
Common
No, no,
answer.
you don't. I think that's something you think about when you're young, like you said. Once you
Hmm.
get older and you've been hurt by the truth a few times, you don't need
Yeah.
it anymore, you know?
I really don't want someone's impressions, like a live stream of someone's internal impressions of me. And so I think that, reading reviews and absorbing the criticism now is the same as having that ability to read minds, and it's not something we should do. I think that the author, it's incumbent upon them to find the beauty of it, innocence and ignorance again. Because the difficulty is, as you know, as you've written books, the less ignorance you have, sometimes the more difficult that it is to write. Same as sometimes the people that are most instructed in how to write have difficulty writing, because if you're trying to emulate Steinbeck, you're not going to succeed. If you're trying to write with the criticism of teachers in your head who kept you down when you're younger, you're not going to succeed unless you find a way to use it as fuel. And I think that that is a very rare thing amongst authors, because authors are inherently sensitive beings. And sensitive beings will remember criticism much longer than they will remember praise. I still remember reading my first reviews and from Betsy in Iowa, and giving me like a 1 star because she didn't like certain aspect. And I still remember certain things that were said. And that's those things will leave an impression just like a teacher will, unless you turn it into fuel and like, I'm going to show you Betsy from Iowa, you know.
I
And
mean, I've also
so,
seen other authors actually just read their 1 star reviews out loud, right? Like actors do as well. I don't think I
sure,
could do it though. I
sure,
couldn't. I'm a little too.
sure.
I have tough skin, but once you get beneath the skin, it's too soft inside.
Yeah, but that's also a little bit from my perspective of me doth think she protests too much. Or she doth protest too much, methinks, is actually the quote. And I think that sometimes people will say that it doesn't affect them, but it does. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same way some authors claim to not have um, writer's block.
Mm-hmm.
Well, perhaps you just haven't encountered it yet. Doesn't mean it's not real. Doesn't mean you actually do. It's kind of the same thing as like Forbes. You know, in Forbes, where the CEOs tell you their schedule,
Oh
of
yes.
like,
Uh-huh.
get up at 5 a.m., take a cold plunge, run 10 miles, run, all this stuff, meditate. No, you don't do that. You do that sometimes. That's the idealized version of you. The
Right.
idealized version of us always uses criticism as fuel. The idealized version of me is remembering the teachers that gave me negative feedback and is, showing them what's up. But at the same time, we're human and we have low days and high days. And I think that, hopefully we have more days where we're on our high vibration, right? But the fundamental trick I found is remembering that you're on a quest when you're telling a book, when you're telling a story. And your quest is to get it done, then get it good. And you can't get it done if you're constantly doubting yourself. And what creates doubt? It's the negative feedback. So somehow turn it into fuel, whatever it is. Like, heck, I put my rejection letters on my bat. Like I got 120 rejections before I got an agent, and I printed them all out and I put them on my wall. And then when I finally got published, I took all those letters down and threw them away, or burned some of them. Forget which. They they were gone. But I tried to make that into a reminder of like, these are the people saying you can't do this, or these are the people saying you're not good enough. And for me, that helped become fuel.
I love that. I mean, I also think that for writers and any artists, any creatives, you have to operate with a certain level of delusion in order to
Mm-hmm.
make it, right? You have to
Mm-hmm.
believe that this thing that you're making
Mm-hmm.
is the absolute greatest story, the greatest painting, the greatest sculpture ever created in order to keep going
Mm-hmm.
when you're absent of any feedback or if the feedback you're getting is rejections, right?
Yeah.
So trying
And forget,
to block out as
yeah.
much as possible is important.
And forget even criticism. Forget criticism. Forget how it'll be reviewed. Forget even if it's good. You are sacrificing precious time on this spinning rock. Time you won't get back. Life. The most valuable thing there is. You're sacrificing life to tell this story, so you have to believe it's important.
I agree. Okay. Do you think success has changed your writing? Do you find it easier or harder to create if you know that fans are waiting for new words from you? Because I'm waiting for
More,
your next book. So,
yeah,
quick, quick, quick.
more difficult. More difficult because even if you don't want to keep it in mind, you don't want to let people down. And you, back in the day, more people. Back to your original question, more people like dislike my book, Red Rising, than I thought would ever read it. So now that I have now that I have so many readers who do love it, I don't want to I don't want to fan service them and just give them something that meets their expectations,
Hmm.
because then I think that's the death of a series. But I also want to retain, and so I want to retain originality, but I also want to, fulfill the promises that I've made and in the story, and not break the fourth wall, so to speak, by screwing up at the end. And now that I'm doing the seventh book, and I'm very happy with the other books, landing every book is now the hardest book I've ever written. Each book is incrementally harder. And so when I write the seventh book, I'll be delighted if I do it right? And disconsolate if I do it wrong. But that doesn't, at the end of the day, I really want it to be received well, and what a relief if it is. But I can't finish a book unless I'm happy with it,
Hmm.
and that's what'll really matter in the end. Because you can't do this. You can't take straw polls. You can't let Reddit or Goodreads write your book for you, because then you'll have something that is not true to you. And readers can sense insincerity, I think. So it has
Yeah,
to be sincere to me. And so remembering that with success is difficult. Yes.
that makes a lot of sense to me. Does writing make you happy? This process of it, just the
No.
pureness of the writing, the expectations, everything, or each piece separately?
No, no, it makes me miserable. I don't like writing. I hate writing. I like telling stories. Writing is the medium that gets in the way. The medium is the hard thing. Like, do you enjoy writing?
I do like writing,
You're a
but
monster.
trying to make it really good, that part's not fun. I
Oh
guess
man,
maybe
I
that's
don't.
what you're saying. I guess that's the storytelling. But I actually enjoy words a lot.
Mm-hmm. Sure, I enjoy that aspect. Sometimes I love the flow state when you get into it. I don't like the difficulty of getting into the flow state. I don't like
Hmm.
the mm, Byzantine puzzle of piecing it all together. The second guessing, all those aspects. In pure form, I do enjoy it, but damn, it's hard for me.
If you weren't a writer, what else would you be doing?
Marine biology, exploring the ocean would be my cup of tea.
I like that. I like that a lot. Since this podcast is called Creative, Inspired, Happy, we've hit a little bit on happy. I kind of want to come back to it. I want to ask you the big life question: what is happiness? But let's save that for the end because that's
An
very, very
illusion.
big. But I want to talk about inspiration and creativity. So when I
Hmm.
was naming this show, I had a debate with my husband whether it should be creative first or inspired first. And I was saying you need inspiration first before you can be creative. And he was saying it's really the opposite. And after thinking about it, I agreed with him because I think creativity is almost a muscle that you can work. And that if you sit around waiting for inspiration to strike you first, then you'll be waiting a long time. But you don't have to have inspiration in order to start making small sparks of creativity. At least that's my theory. So
Hmm.
I'm curious what you think about that and if you have any tips for people.
I almost take issue with the concept that they're two different things. I think labor. So I think that like the labor comes first. I mean, you can have inspiration. So like in order to even think that you should be a writer or could be a writer, you're going to have some sort of inspiration. That said, you can't always expect it um, to flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Labor allows inspiration to manifest. It allows it to come onto the page. So if you're waiting for inspiration, I think your husband is very right. You can be waiting forever, particularly for the course of an entire book. Momentum is what helps inspiration come, right? And so I think inspiration and creativity, I almost have a difficulty thinking that they're different things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that the labor is what you can always control. You can always control how many hours you're sitting down to write. You can control how um, concentrated you are, or how sacred you make your writing time, and how seriously you take it. You cannot control inspiration or creativity. Um, the only way that you can um, influence them is by treating it like a muscle, like you said, and feeding it the right protein, feeding it hydrating. So Stephen King has said, of course, in his on writing that I think he used the metaphor of a car that a writer without who doesn't read has no gas in the tank. And I very much think that's true. And I think that a lot of writers, and myself included, will stop reading, particularly when writing, for fear of being intimidated, for fear of aping a style, for fear of time being spent in reading instead of producing. And I think that that's a classic mistake because you're not enough. The things that you take in and then filter through your creativity, through your own perception, is your voice, is what will come out of you. So I think that the sum of all the influences on me go into this big old bowl inside, this big old vat, a cauldron, and it becomes a gumbo. And when I'm writing, I'm reaching down a ladle and I'm drawing out the gumbo, right? And the more stuff goes in there, the more things I take in, the more sparks, to stick with the metaphor, the more shrimp and sausage and okra I'm going to be pulling out of that gumbo. But if it's just me, then nothing's coming in, and that pot is sitting in there. And to continue the metaphor, the it's getting the moisture is getting boiled out. The soup's getting denser and thicker, more viscousy, and there's nothing new coming in, right? You want fresh soup. So you got to continue, I think, to bring things in, and then you have to continue to show up. So you can control the labor, you can control when you show up, you can control setting up an optimal work situation, but you cannot rely on yourself to just be inspired, right? Because then you'll be, always the person with a book that you've wanted to write.
Of course, you'll be everyone else who says, "Oh, when I have time, I'll write a book."
Whereas, as someone who's written a book, you know that part of the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into writing a book, right, and doubt and all these things, and that's the equity you're putting into it. If you're thinking about it from like a business standpoint, you're putting in that as equity, and you're getting out the material. If you're unless you're willing to put something in, you're not going to get something out.
Yeah. So, what is your ideal day? This is Forbes magazine version of authors.
Oh my
What
God.
what are the optimal conditions for you for working?
Optimal conditions for me is to, I think that in the same way I was saying that what you take in is tied into what you put out, is to not touch my phone until I've written my chunk for the day. This is not always the case, but my optimal work conditions is to wake up, take my dog out, meditate, cold shower, and then write for 4 hours or write for 2,000 words. And then I can check my phone. I don't have kids. I'm successful enough. I don't have to worry about too many things if, that time can be sacred. And that's something I've had to instill in my life, because the older you get, the more plates you get have in the air, the more people want your time, the more immediate things seem to be. But no one really needs you that much, sadly, unless you're a parent, or unless people are depending on you. I think that there's time we can all carve out. So I try to carve out that 4 hour, 5 hour window. And then ideally, I go work out and review what I've written, and then read or watch something to settle down for the evening, and then do it again. And I have to treat it like almost like I'm an athlete, because otherwise I will be kind of half in, half out all day, writing here, writing there, um, procrastinating, dealing with my filling up inbox, checking messages. I think very much this world is good at, well, so much of this world has been designed now by social scientists in order to occupy your time, to take your time, to make you unable to get off the dopamine treadmill that is Instagram or online shopping or checking your messages or anything. These things are designed to steal your time because your time is being commodified by other people. So I can't have those hooks put into my brain early on in the morning, because then it affects how I think the rest of the day and it fucks up my reward cycle. So what I try to do is not get any of those hooks in early on, and my brain is fresher. And I can actually believe that the world I'm creating is important. I can sink into it, and I can feel as though I'm being sincere to it, as opposed to, oh, I got to do this because it's work.
I love that.
Long
I like
answer,
that.
long answer, but I think that it's a very dangerous time for writers. And I
No, I
think
think
that,
that's, I agree. And it's really
yeah.
interesting to hear you talk about your ideal day because it mirrors very much my ideal day. I don't know if you've read Cal Newport's Deep Work, but it's basically the
Mm,
same thing about how to be very focused in a distracted world, and it's stay off social media, all that kind of stuff. But
yeah.
it is to work in these big chunks of time so you can
Hmm.
fully let yourself immerse, right? So, like when I'm
Yeah.
writing, it is 2 hours in the morning. I'll take a lunch break, but I have no inputs during lunch. I'm sitting in the kitchen just eating and I'm thinking. Like, no one's allowed to talk to me. My husband works
Hmm.
from home. He knows, don't
Hmm.
talk to me because I'm actually still working. And then I go back to my
Hmm.
desk and I write for like another 2 hours. But it's also the same. Like, I really think I max out around 4 hours if I am truly intensely concentrating. That's when my
Yeah.
creativity starts to kind of peter out. The words
It
start to feel
gets
thin. But
It's very
then I know I've
difficult
done a
after
good
that,
job.
right?
I've done my work for the day.
Very hard to find that flow state after 4 hours, isn't it?
Hmm.
Yeah.
It is.
And I think that you're very right. And I think that people have to be very careful with how they take breaks. Getting on Instagram and scrolling is not taking a break. That is taking a detour.
Right.
Taking a break is allowing your brain to settle down, not throwing serotonin at it or dopamine.
Right. Yeah, totally agree. Okay, what's one thing that you've done you think that's been good for your career besides actually writing?
Oh gosh. Something that's been good for my career besides actually writing is honestly maintaining health. I think that's the most important thing. Somehow we think that we've gotten tricked thinking that the brain and the body, well, how to say this, we, when we're trying to accomplish something, will often ignore other aspects of our life that are not important, that are deemed not important, and then we start suffering, and we think that suffering is part of working hard. No, no, you're just making it hard, the task harder, without actually working harder. You're just suffering, and so I think that maintaining health, maintaining relationships are the most important things for helping my career. In terms of strategic decisions, I think those are all or tactical decisions or strategic decisions. I think those are all secondary, um, because everything is influenced by how you feel. And so creating a solid foundation of health and relationships is the most important thing. That also ties into professional relationships. I'm same with the same agent, I'm with the same publisher. Now, not everyone will be that fortunate, but I found that continuity helps having people invested in your career. They are proud of you and they want to grow with you. And they're not trying to extract from you a precious resource. You are the precious resource. And that's a much healthier working relationship than I think a lot of industries have.
And do you have a lot of author friends as well? And is there any competitiveness, especially if I think a lot of times writers become friends early in their careers, but
Hmm.
then at some point careers accelerate, decelerate at different times. It can be quite difficult.
I have some author friends. Yeah, I don't have as many authors do. I I think that there is that competitive nature to it. Plus, authors are a particular type of person. Um, I'm friends with a lot of creatives, but I find it more interesting for me personally to be friends with creatives in disciplines that are different than my own. I don't like complaining. I don't like talking shop. So those are two things that authors love to do.
This is true. This is true.
And I don't want to do that. Like, whenever someone asks how my day is, I just say, I'm pretty much like fine or not fine, and I want to move on. I don't want to talk about it. I want to talk about something else. And so for me, authors, while I love seeing them at cons and stuff like that, in my daily life, I only have like one or two that I really talk with. Everyone else, and I live in Los Angeles, so like more of my friends are in the film world or are artists. I find
Hmm.
visual artists are pretty fun. I have quite a few friends who are visual artists, and I find that different discipline allows me to be more creative, and then I get to be interested. Like I don't follow the trades. I don't know who's getting published. I don't know. I don't even track my own book sales. I think that the more I focus on the business side of things, the less I am like a child at play. And so I try to retain the child at play. And I don't even know like I didn't even know my publisher was sold to to another company. I didn't even know that I thought I was like for instance I thought I was going to be number one on New York Times bestseller list with my new book coming out. And then there's this book called Fourth Wing. And I'm like, what's Fourth Wing? And then I look and I'm like, oh, everyone knows what Fourth Wing is. It's been on the list for like 12 weeks in a row. I didn't have a chance. And so, but I find that ignorance allows me to not be competitive with people and allows me to enjoy people in the moment, as opposed to keeping track and score. So I just don't. And that helps me just be, whether it makes me an idiot at play or a child at play is to be debated. But either way, protecting the ignorance again.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I think that there are a lot of authors who they like to talk shop. I love talking shop.
Yeah.
But also, complain. I don't like to complain. So
Hmm.
my group of author friends, we meet once a month and we're kind of just a literary salon. We just hang
That's
out and talk
fun.
about everything else. And
That's
that's
fun.
the best. I think for me, happiness is finding your people who are complements. We're not the same. We're also different.
Yeah.
And when I come home, my family will ask, how are your friends? And I'll say, each of my friends is so very themselves because they
Hmm.
are all like characters in a book. And it's enriching to be with all of these incredibly diverse people who are just completely different from me, whether they're authors, artists, or, something
Hmm.
else completely not artistic. Okay,
Hmm.
so I want to do some quick lightning round questions with you
Okay.
that are one sentence or less. All right, they're super short.
We'll
All
see
right,
if I don't soliloquize.
that's all right. All right, do you listen to music while you're writing?
Sometimes. Oh, more than
Mount.
one word. Um, it's feast or famine for me. I will go months doing it and months not.
Okay, mountain or beach?
For writing,
For life.
mountain.
Social media, love, hate, or it's complicated?
Burn in hell.
Do you believe in writer's block?
Yes.
Let's see. A book that you've recently read that made you pause and think.
Mm. Nuclear War: A Situation by Annie Jacobson.
Ooh, tell me about that. You can have more than one sentence.
Oh, okay. It's going deep into the systems we have in our country in case a nuclear war breaks out. And it's very troubling.
That sounds like a fun read.
It's going to be Denis Villeneuve's next movie after he's done with Dune. Either that or Rendezvous with Rama.
Ooh.
Yeah, he's going for some very light subject matter.
Yeah. All right. You get to have one lightning round question for me if you would like it.
What is a book that you wish you wrote?
I mean, if I could, I would have written an award-winning book.
No, 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 no.
All right, let's see.
A book that is so just lovely that you're like,
Lovely.
darn, I wish I wrote. I mean, that just channeled me. For instance, I would have chosen like The Matrix. I would have loved to have made that movie because, oh, so good.
That is really good. Okay, hold on. I'm going to cheat and look at my bookshelf. Okay, The Kingdoms by Natasha Pulley. She's a UK fantasy author who is huge over there, and people in the US are starting to know her, but not as much yet. And she just
Okay.
writes gorgeous atmospheric fantasy, and she's very good with warping time. So I'm very jealous of that because I feel like anything that has a real manipulation of timelines in a complicated way is
Mm.
just, it requires so much intelligence.
I feel like we just got a glimpse of like 9-year-old Evelyn. Just the enthusiasm with which you explained that. The Kingdoms, you said?
The Kingdoms, yep.
The Kingdoms. Love it. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's pretty much it. It was a lovely, as always, to hang out
Great.
with you.
Oh,
I feel
my
like we could go
pleasure.
on for hours, but
Yeah,
we have to
we
let you
could.
get back to your next book.
And I do count you in my author friends. You fit on
The,
one hand.
the ones who are okay.
Yeah, the ones who are okay. Oh man. I hope we get to cross paths again soon.
Yeah, for sure. Before we go, tell listeners where they can find you online, even though you're not very online.
Oh, even though I'm not very online, they can find me at X Pierce_Brown. Never on there, but I am on Instagram at Pierce Brown Official.
Awesome. So don't forget to pick up Pierce's Red Rising books, which are available everywhere books are sold. Pierce, thank you so much for being on Creative Inspired Happy.
My pleasure.
Want more writing advice and career insight? Join thousands for free at creativeinspiredhappy.com to go behind the scenes with best-selling authors and get access to our book club for writers, creativity challenges, and more. I can't wait to see you there.